I'm the Director of Product Management and Design. So I'm very heavily involved in the design of our equipment and deciding how it should work and what features it should offer the customers. And I'm very pleased to be here in Norway, in Oslo. It's my first time here. And I'd like to talk to you primarily today about our MixPre series of recorders. But before I do, I'd just like to give a very brief history of what Sound Devices is about. You may or may not know that Sound Devices has been probably the world leader in sound for picture, recorders and mixers for capturing sound for picture. Really, for the last 20 years, we're a 20-year-old company. Now, our products are used in the making of many Oscar-winning Hollywood movies. You know, just to name a few: Mad Max, Star Wars, La La Land. Our recorders and mixers are used in the making of probably the majority of Netflix shows as well. And the reason why Sound Devices, recorders and mixers have become so popular, well, there's multiple reasons, but probably the two most fundamental reasons are reliability and build quality, and which is essential for capturing sound on location, right? Because you could be in any type of environment, and you're sometimes running around up mountains, sometimes you're in very high humidity situations in the jungle, sometimes you're in deserts, sometimes you're in the Antarctic. You need equipment that can stand up to the rigors of what locations can throw at you. And the second reason, but equally important, is the quality of our sound, the mic preamps. I mean, that has got to be the most fundamental, important quality that someone who's capturing sound is interested in. So yeah, our mic preamps are very well known for having really low noise, which means that you're not going to experience any hiss in your recordings. Hands up who's ever experienced like a hissy, noisy sort of recording. Yeah, we all have, right? But Sound Devices, aims to really help in that department. Not just really low noise, but really wide gain range. So that means you can, even with the most insensitive microphones, get enough gain to get some good signal. So these, we also have great things like analog limiters in our analog preamps, which is very important for preventing digital distortion. So these are the two fundamental reasons why Sound Devices have become so popular in the film and TV industry. The mic preamps and the build quality. So today, that's a bit of a background on Sound Devices. Today I want to talk about our latest generation recorder family, the MixPre series, of which there are 4 models. And they come in all shapes and sizes. There's the MixPre 3, there's the MixPre 6, which is currently mounted under this iPad, and there's the MixPre 10T. And there's actually a 4th model, which is in the corner over there, called the MixPre 10M, which I'll talk about a little bit later. But basically, this family of recorders is bringing the Sound Devices build and microphone preamp quality to a much wider audience. Sound Devices products have usually previously only been in the realm of the super professional audio sound guy, to be able to, because they're a higher value, out of the reach of the majority of the market. But with the MixPre series range, we're bringing this quality and build quality and audio quality to a wider audience. And these recorders are aimed at videographers who want to capture good sound, podcasters, and podcasting seems to be on the growth these days. Great sound for podcasting, for musicians, for sound designers, and for production sound mixers who maybe want to start off with a more accessible price point production sound recorder. So we cover a whole wide range of applications here. So let's take a look at the MixPre series a bit closer. Now, the thing that they all share the same interface. They have, let me just move over here. I'm gonna talk primarily and demonstrate primarily with a MixPre-10T here at the moment. So everything I'm going to show you really applies to the smaller models too, the MixPre-3 and the MixPre-6. And so the user interface is common. They all have like these faders for making your mix and for setting the level of your tracks, the audio level on the tracks. And they have this display here, which is actually a touch screen. So you're able to make all your parameter changes from this screen. The main difference between the three models is the number of inputs or outputs. So I think the most important decision someone has to make in deciding which of these versions is suitable for them is how many inputs am I going to simultaneously be able to record at the same time, or how many outputs do I need? So this MixPre-3 here, the smallest of the units here, it's just at the moment you can see it's mounted to the underside of this DSLR camera. It's small enough actually to fit into your pocket. It's that small. But this has got 3 XLR inputs, right, and a stereo unbalanced output. It can record those 3 inputs as individual tracks, but also make a mix of them. There's the MixPre-6 over there on the end of the table. Now this has 6 inputs, 4 XLR quarter-inch combo jacks, and also an unbalanced 3.5mm stereo input. And you can record all 6 inputs to individual tracks and then make a mix. So that can actually record 8 tracks from its 6 inputs. So 5 tracks, 8 tracks, 3 inputs, 6 inputs, hence the MixPre-3, the MixPre-6. The MixPre-10T, which is the largest unit of the group, and even though it's the largest unit in the group, it's still pretty small. This has 10 inputs, so it's got 8 XLR quarter-inch combos, plus the 3.5mm stereo unbalanced input. So that's your 10 inputs, and each of those inputs can be recorded as its own isolated track, and then you can also record a mix at the same time. So this is a 12-track, 10-input recorder. The other difference between this large unit and the other 2 units is it has a greater number of outputs. The 2 smaller units have just a stereo output, and this is to keep the unit small. But this is more than useful for either feeding a DSLR, or if you're working in a little home studio, maybe you could use it to feed some active monitors on your desktop. The MixPre-10T has a bit more flexibility with its outputs. So it's got 4 outputs, 2 of which are balanced on mini XLRs, otherwise known as TA3s. And it also has an unbalanced stereo output too, so that gives you 4 outputs. And each of these outputs on any of the 3 devices can be configured with any source signal. We've got routing matrices on all the outputs. So if you want to route input 8 and 5 to one of the outputs, you can, or any combination. I'm going to go into this in a bit more detail later, but the 10T, and the T is the operative word here, stands for timecode. So the 10T also has a fully featured timecode generator and reader built in, which means you can either use it as a master or a slave. And it's a fully featured timecode generator, so it has all the timecode modes that you typically have for synchronizing audio with a camera. For instance, free run, record run, time of day timecode mode. You can run any any frame rate, sorry. You can jam timecode into this unit, so if you want to use a master timecode generator box, such as a Nano Locket or a Tentacle Sync or a timecode systems box to act as a master, you can jam that timecode into here. So, yeah, fully featured timecode capability. The smaller units, although they don't have a timecode generator built in, they do have timecode readers. Now, they can take, crucially, and this is really great for people, videographers, and anyone working with cameras, you can take the timecode via HDMI out from your camera into the recorders, and so that you can ensure the same timecode is recorded on the audio recorder and the camera. So that makes it easy to synchronize in post. So this is a really nice feature, and actually I'm going to sort of try and demonstrate this now with this setup. So here's the MixPre-serie. We've connected the HDMI out from this Leica. Now, this will work with pretty much any Sony or Panasonic or camera out there, whether they're a DSLR like the A7S or the A7R, or on the Panasonic front, the GH4 or the GH5, the FS5, the FS7, and a bunch of other cameras all provide this capability of sending timecode over HDMI. So let me just demonstrate that. I have the HDMI out connected from this camera into a port here called HDMI timecode in. I can set the menu to receive timecode such that, and also I can set it such that when it sees a record flag coming over the HDMI cable from the camera, it will automatically trigger this into record. That's a really useful feature, to be able to only hit record on the camera and not have to worry about hitting record on the audio device as well, because it's so easy to forget in the heat of battle. So I'm just going to turn on our camera here. This is, as I said, a Leica, and you're probably not going to be able to see this that clearly. It's just booting up, but you probably can't see this, but now the display on the MixPre-serie at the top here is showing the timecode counter, and it's matching the timecode being generated from the camera. So in theory now, if I hit record on this camera, this is set to record run at the moment, which means it only starts incrementing the timecode counter when the camera is in record. When I hit record, this is going to start counting and following the timecode from the camera, and it should automatically drop into record. So let's see. So I've just hit record, and notice the unit's just dropped into record there. So now you have a totally synchronized system in terms of the transport control as well as the timecode. This is great. It's fail-safe. You haven't forgotten to record on one device or the other. And when you take the audio files that we're recording on this now, the timecode in these files is going to match the timecode on your camera. When I press stop here now, this should drop out of record as it has done there. So that's a really neat feature. And as I said, it's going to work with a whole myriad of cameras out there, from Leicas to Sonys to Panasonics, etc. Actually, while we're here, I want to show you how easy it is to mount these MixPre recorders to various devices. There's a 1/4" 20 mounting system. So let me just show you how that works. Here we go. Here's something I prepared earlier, I think. Okay. So I'm going to release this battery pack here. We'll talk more about powering in a minute, everybody. So this Allen key here actually is a nice touch we provided for convenience. Actually sits in the back of the compartment here, and it's magnetized, so it just holds neatly in place. So you're never going to be without this hex key. There's nothing more frustrating than, I need to mount it. Where do I find a hex key? Well, there it is in the back here. So I can just take this out, and if I insert this in here, I can now unscrew this. Let's just do this here. Don't want to drop anything on the floor. There you go. Comes apart that easily. Right? And this is a captive 1/4" 20 screw. So you literally just push here, and you can see now this 1/4" screw. It's held captive with a spring-based system. Okay? Really nice touch. So, look, you can see how small that MixPre-serie is now, right? It's very easily fits in a small bag. In fact, all of these do. They're so small. So while we're here, looking at the back of the unit, you'll notice that this is where the recording medium is stored. We record to SD card on all of the models, okay? And you can use pretty much any size, all the way up to 0.5 terabyte. I mean, that's literally going to give you months and months of non-stop recording. So you should never have a worry about running out of space. So that slots in the back there. This is the same for all of the 4 models. The powering, the units can be powered from either AA cells or lithium-ion L-mount batteries. Is everyone familiar with this type of Sony L-mount battery? Very common in the videography world, right? So we have a lithium-ion L-mount battery caddy here, which is an optional accessory. So I'll just show you here. It comes like that, and you can see you actually can store 2 batteries, one on either side. So that's one option, and that simply, very easily, just clips in the back like this. Okay, and then you're ready to go. So that's the lithium-ion, and you know these L mounts come in various sizes. These are the small ones, okay. But you can get I've forgotten that, I think 40. I can't remember the power output on them, but the mid-size ones and then the large-size ones. And even with 2 mid-size ones, you're going to be able to power this all day. Yeah, so it's really cool. Obviously, sometimes more convenient are AA cells. So we provide 2 types of AA caddy. There's a 4 AA caddy here, and then there's an 8 AA caddy as well, so 4 on each side. Okay. Now, we recommend using nickel metal hydride rechargeables because they have higher power and can deliver more current. We really don't recommend at all using standard alkalines. They're not designed to provide the current required. Lithium primary cells are really good as well. They can give really long duration recording. So we have our L mounts, we have AA battery solution. The 3 and the 6, the 2 smaller units, can also be powered from a USB battery pack, like an Anker. I mean, there's many of these out there now. And basically, you can connect that Anker cell or USB battery pack to the USB-C port on the side. Those batteries come in all sorts of sizes and power ratings, so you can power these for several days at a time if you wanted off one of those charged battery packs. We can also power the MixPre-serie and the 6 directly from your computer over USB. So if you're using it as a USB audio interface, you don't need to worry about any other external power. Regarding the larger unit, the 10T and the 10M, you cannot power via USB, and that's because we've got more circuitry for a high number of preamps and a higher number of outputs. That requires more current. That's the laws of physics. So you cannot power via USB. You can power via L-mount. You can power via the AA batteries. But we also have an additional option of being able to power from external DC. And there's an external DC port just here at the right-hand rear corner. And that's using like a 4-pin, what we call a Heroes connector. It's a lockable connector, so it can't just be pulled out. And that's just 10 volts to 18 volt range. Okay. So as you can see, we provide lots of powering options, which is really important for a portable device. You know, I'd like to pass this round actually and let everyone just feel the build quality and how this will inspire confidence in any location. You can drop these things and they are going to survive pretty much any fall. Die-cast aluminum, really solid build. There's Gorilla Glass on the touch screen to help protect the touch screen. Most devices in this category now, they're made out of flimsy plastic. I'm not going to mention any manufacturers' names, but I think you know most devices now, to cut corners in terms of cost, they're just made flimsy in it. You really don't want to drop them. With this, I mean, you can even drive a truck over this and it will survive. So when you buy into the MixPre-series, you really are buying a product that's going to live with you for a long time. And I think that's, an essential thing. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about some other functionality. I want to show you a little bit of the user interface while we're here. So we spoke about recording to SD card, okay, available everywhere. And it's really nice to have an SD card, a ubiquitous type of media. The MixPre-10T, the two large units, can also store data on a USB thumb drive. Something like this. Have you seen like these little mini USB thumb drives? You can barely see it. I mean, these surprisingly now come in sizes up to like 64 gig. I actually even think there's 128 gigabyte versions of these now. It's incredible. But if you insert that into the USB-A port on the side here, it will automatically copy all the data from your SD card to the USB thumb drive. Now, what that means is at the end of your day's shoot, you have two pieces of media. One's a backup, right? Or one is a handoff copy, and you get to keep your own. So that's really nice. Now, this USB thumb drive is only available on the larger unit, not the 3 and the 6. In terms of reliability, though, I mean, we talk about backups. These units are so ultra reliable in terms of really robust file handling. If you were to pull the power in the middle of recording on any of these devices, many devices would corrupt that file. But we have a very clever system which continually updates the file header. So even if you pull all power in the middle of recording, those files are safe. That's a confidence-inspiring thing. Okay. So yeah, the higher-end unit, the 10T, has this option for recording to a thumb drive, and the user has to not worry about it. Okay, you just plug in the drive and it will auto-copy. Thank you. So let's, while we're on the subject of USB, I just want to mention the other features that the USB provides on these devices. These are obviously primarily location field recorders. Great for videographers, YouTubers, podcasters, field recorders, sound designers. But they're also great tools for using in the studio because they all act as USB audio interfaces as well. So if you're a musician or a podcaster that does a lot of work interfacing to a computer, these are great devices for that too. And we have, they all have a different number of ins and outs to your computer. So the large unit is a 12-in, 4-out. The MixPre-6 is an 8-in, 4-out. And the MixPre-3 is a 5-in, 2-out. So the really unique thing about these products, and there is no other device on the market that does this, is that when they are connected as a USB audio interface to your Windows or Mac, they can also continue to record. Any device out there that can do recording or USB audio interface, it's like an either-or situation. With this, you can do both, which is great because the number of applications which arise from that, these make great backups to computers. But a really key one is the ability to, if you're like a podcaster and you've got a remote contributor over Skype or FaceTime, you can bring their audio signal in via USB onto a fader and then mix them in with your program and then record it all on here. So that's a really neat feature. I'm going to backtrack a little bit and just talk a little bit about the quality, the audio quality. I know I mentioned this at the start. This is what Sound Devices is all about. But really, I think what really makes this a great tool for videographers and podcasters and others, and a lot of people who may be not as experienced with audio as they are with picture, and maybe not so familiar with optimizing gain structure and all that. I mean, how does someone like that who doesn't have that experience get world-class sound? We've designed these so that you don't need to have much knowledge with audio at all, and you can still capture great sound. And that all comes down to the design of the analog inputs, or the mic preamps. So as I mentioned at the start, all sound devices preamps are super low noise and wide dynamic range. What that means is, even if you plug in your mic and you've set the record level too low, and it's all like really, really low, when you record that, normally, first thing that's going to happen in post-production is they're going to, oh, this signal's really low, I need to boost that. And normally what would happen if the mic preamp is a noisy preamp is it's going to not just boost the mic signal, it's going to boost the noise floor as well. And that's when you start to hear all this hiss. And that happens so frequently with many people who don't understand how to optimize their record levels. The fact that this is so low noise, even if you've recorded at low level and you boost the level, you're still not going to hear the noise floor. Does that make sense? So this is a really nice thing. What we say to our users is, don't worry too much about where you set this level. You know, just as long as you're getting some sort of indication of green there, you know, that's going to be good. You know, roughly. Don't worry about it too much. If you touch the have the gain set a bit too low, like down here, it's still going to be fine. You're still going to see something, right? So that really does help. We've got, on the other end of the scale is, what about if you set your levels too high? Has everyone experienced digital distortion and what that can sound like if you've set your levels too high? That can sound very sort of graty and noisy and crackly, and it's just horrible distortion. It's the worst thing. We are unique in this category in that we offer what's called analog limiting on each input. Now, analog limiting is designed to prevent this digital overload. And really, most other recorders out there, they don't have this. They have something called digital limiting, which is actually pretty much a waste of time, because the damage is already done by the time you've got into the digital domain. What you're trying to do with an analog limiter is to prevent the level exceeding the maximum level that the analog to digital converter chip can handle. If you exceed that level, you're just creating distortion which can never be repaired. So you need to prevent that distortion in the analog domain. And that's what we do, and we're very unique in that respect. So what I say here, again, on the other end of the scale, if your gain is turned a fraction too high, like here, you can see now that this ring LED around the fader is, when it gets a loud level, it's glowing orange. That means that the limiter, the analog limiter, is activating and it's preventing the distortion. It's not a bad thing. What we say is, if you occasionally see that glow on loud signal, if someone, say, shouts or gets a bit excited with their speech like this, then just set it so that set the level here so that it occasionally goes orange. That's fine. Okay, you don't need to worry about it. So what this means overall is, if you're not that experienced with optimizing your audio levels, you know, and videographers obviously want to focus primarily on the picture, understandably, there's enough to think about, right? Let the MixPre handle this. Just set it so that you're seeing a bit of green, the occasional bit of orange, that's fine. Don't stress or worry about if the levels are too loud or too soft at that point. The quality of the mic pre's and the analog limiters are going to be your savior. All right? Nothing is going to sound as good as this. Now, these mic preamps in here are very comparable with our high-end preamps on our much higher value recorders. So we are not compromising on the quality or the build quality. While we're talking about audio quality, I should mention sample rate. You know, everyone wants to know, how high can you go with sample rate? Well, we can do everything from 44.1 all the way up to 192 kilohertz on the 10 and the 6. With the MixPre-serie, you can go from 44.1 kilohertz up to 96 kilohertz. So, you know, really great range there. They can all offer up to 24-bit recording, just throwing a bit of like specky stuff at you right now. The gain range on the mic preamps is huge. I mean, like you're talking about a total gain from sort of input trim through to mix of 96 dBs. You don't need any external preamp with these things, even if your mic is the most insensitive mic. All right? Okay, so let's talk now about the user interface, because another thing which is really essential for less experienced users is how can we make the interface really approachable and accessible, that there is not a learning curve, a big learning curve. So one of the number one concepts of the design of this product is how easy can we make it to use. We don't want users to have to go into the user guide to work out how to use this. And if you look at the interface on the product, you can see that, I mean, that's a really simple interface. What do these buttons do? Record, yes, well, that's obvious. Stop, that's obvious. Play. It's pretty hard to not know what those is. And oh, look, these are your level controls for each input, 1, 2, and 3. Really, you don't need to know much more than that to get great sounding audio. The only thing you really need to know is to plug your mic in and to know whether it's a condenser or a dynamic mic. And I think that's a fairly basic bit of knowledge too. So we've designed this by default from the factory. All of the units ship in what's called basic mode, where we've really stripped back the interface to do the core functions, which will enable you to get recording really great audio out of the box. But if you're a more advanced user, then we have something called advanced mode. Let me show you this now. So I'm just going to go back. Let's just take a little bit of the user interface here. As I said, this is a touch screen. And this is where you can set up various parameters. You can touch the screen and see different metering views. So here we're just looking at the stereo signal, the stereo mix right now. Okay, and as I turn that down, the signal disappears. I can look at not just the stereo mix signal, I can look at all of the individual tracks that I'm recording, which are displayed vertically along the bottom here, as well as the mix. At the top of the screen here, you can see the name of the file. So if I go into record here, you can see it's recording this file called MixPre-001. I can customize the name of that file to anything I like to make it sound more descriptive. I can show you that in a minute. And you can see this counter running underneath. That's either your absolute time counter or your time code counter. At the bottom here of the screen, just along the bottom, is a status bar which gives you various information, and you can touch this and pull up various different information by touching that. In the top right corner here, we have the access to the main menu. So let's just go in here, and you're presented with a whole bunch of sub-menu options here: presets, project, inputs and outputs. You can see these 3 dots at the top here. That's like a page number indicator. So if I touch that, it'll bring me up the 2nd and 3rd page of various menus, okay? Pretty easy to navigate. In the top left corner here, we have the headphone setup menu. And you can see at the moment, it's telling us that the headphones are monitoring the left-right stereo mix, which is what you're going to be doing like 90% of the time. But you can touch that, and you can call up various other headphone presets. And there's some standard ones which we've included with the box, but also you can set up your own preset headphone mix, headphone presets. Now the headphone port, by the way, is on the right-hand side of the unit, okay, on a 3.5mm stereo connector. And the headphone amp, by the way, on this sounds really great. It can really drive a wide range of headphones low impedance or higher impedance. It's got a lot of punch. It's got a great frequency response, so you can hear low frequencies as well as high frequencies. So it's very easy to customize your headphone presets. You can see here there's something called edit headphone presets. So if I want to make my own and say create a specific mix here, I can come in and choose what inputs or outputs even that I route to my left and right headphone output. So here, for instance, I could have 4 going to left headphone output. Maybe I could put 6 on there as well, input 6. And on the other ear, I could have maybe 5 and 7. I can even route pre-fade or post-fade. Pre-fade is indicated by the color green, and blue indicates post-fade. So you can do all sorts of things. You've even got an MS decoder, which you can apply to your headphones, which we'll talk about that a bit later. Anyway, come back to my home screen by touching the home icon. Before I go any further in the menu here, actually, let's just take you to the 3rd page of the main menu. So, and this is going to be very similar on the other two units as well, this menu navigation. There may be some menus which are not there because there's a reduced feature set on the smaller items, but most of it is common. So let's come through here to the final page, and there's something called System. And there's a menu here called Mode, and at the moment I'm currently in Advanced Mode, but I can set this to Basic, and that's how that's the default mode. I've even got a mode called Custom, so that means you can configure the user interface to display only the features that you're interested in, which is a pretty cool feature. Okay. But let's just leave it on advanced for the time being, because I want to show you all the functionality of each channel. So these are our mix faders. Okay, these are the faders you can use to make to make your mix. You can actually set these to control the level going to your discrete tracks as well, but more about that later. But let's just take a look at a typical, what we call a channel screen. So I'm going to press the knob 8 here, and I am now going to be configuring my track 8. So to access the menu for that track, I press the fader. And now it brings up this screen with various parameters to control. Okay? So I can very quickly solo that channel. So I can hear just that channel if I want to check the quality of it. And you can see that it flashes orange when I'm soloing. I can very quickly mute it. And when I mute it, it goes full red. I can very easily arm and disarm that channel. And notice when it's disarmed, if I go back to my home screen by pressing the home button, it's showing that 8 here is not armed. If I come back in and arm it, now it's showing as red here, okay, which means it's armed. I can adjust the gain. Now this is like the trim gain, so this does affect the actual level to the individual track, because remember, we can record each input on an isolated individual track as well as the mix. And this is really important to be able to do this, because if your mix turned out to be messed up for whatever reason, to be able to go back to the individual isolated tracks allows you to repair that mix. Okay? So this sets the level of the individual or isolated track, and this affects the level to the mix. Okay? So these pots are not going to affect the actual isolated track level. You can, as I said, you can set the unit up so that these do affect your isolated track level. And some people prefer to work that way because they're not interested in the mix. Here's our pan control. And you can see that when I select a parameter, I can use this encoder on the right-hand side of the unit to adjust pan. Okay? I can actually also use the arrows in the display here to make adjustment. Okay? So that's really cool. We have, this is a very important feature. Notice in the bottom right-hand corner a parameter called low cut. Now this is used to reduce handling noise and wind noise. Okay, these are again in the analog domain. So it's very important to prevent this low frequency reaching the analog to digital converter. We provide a whole range of different low cut frequencies, and you can turn it off altogether, in which case you're getting the full 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz bandwidth. But I can now set that to 40, 80, 120, all the way up to 160. Typically for dialogue, I set this to about 120 hertz. It's sort of helping to reduce the wind noise. The low cut basically attenuates all the low frequencies below that frequency, and it does it at an 18 dB per octave roll off, which is very steep. So it very quickly gets rid of that low frequency noise that you don't want. Let's go to the second page, because you can see by this dot here at the top here that there's 2 pages of information. So boom, let's do that. And this is where you would actually set up your type of source. So in this case, I have a mic. I've set it to mic here, and this is a condenser mic that requires 48 volts. So I've turned on the 48 volts. If I turn that off, we've lost the signal. Surprise, surprise. So let's turn it back on again. Okay? And now our signal is back. What other sources can I select? So if I touch on the input selector, I can select between off, mic, line, aux in, aux 2. That's via this 3.5 millimeter connector on the right here. I can also select any of my USB sources coming from my computer. So if I'm hooked up to my computer, in this application I mentioned before, where maybe you're doing a podcast and you're wanting to bring in remote contributors over Skype or FaceTime, I could bring them in via USB, and now I've got my fader here, which is adjusting their level, and I'm recording it all on here. So what a great feature that is. For now, though, I'm just going to go back to our mic signal. All right. A couple of other parameters here: phase, invert, and delay. These are a couple of bonus features that we have on here. The delay is really there to compensate in situations where you may be using a boom mic as well as radio mics, and you want to compensate for the delay coming from the radio mics, okay, and match the boom accordingly. And this prevents like comb filtering artifacts and things like that. Okay, so that's how you set up your inputs, as simple as just pressing whichever input you're interested in. Okay, and you can see I'm just quickly switching between each one. It's also sometimes like when you have all these tracks, it's nice to be able to identify what's on a track, right? Which actor or talent or which interviewee is on what track. Simply by touching the track name at the top here, I can enter a name here. So you can call it, this is like a little virtual keyboard. And again, you use the encoder on the right-hand side here for selecting different letters, characters. You can also, remember I mentioned that we had this USB port here, the USB-A port. You can plug a keyboard in there and enter metadata that way. Makes it a bit easier if you don't want to use that. Actually, there's another way of entering descriptive information or metadata like track names and scene names via a Bluetooth app, which is currently being displayed here on top of our MixPre-6. So this app is called Wingman, and it's free from the App Store. It's also available for Android phones. But what this allows you to do is meter all your signal on a much larger screen. It allows you to arm tracks. It enables you to edit track names, edit scene names, names of files. You can add notes to each of your recordings. And all this information that you're entering will be visible in post, like in Adobe Premiere, Avid, Final Cut Pro. So this is really useful information that you enter here, which the editor can use, and it's going to help make their life easier. All right. You can go into record from here. You can also edit your metadata from and see all the files that you've recorded here. This like file list, and I can select any of these files, and if I made a mistake with the entering of the descriptive data, I can edit it and correct it here. All via Bluetooth wirelessly. It's really nice. So Bluetooth is built into these devices. The other nice thing with the MixPre-10T, you can also use the app to generate a sound report, an electronic sound report, which you can email directly from the app. So you can send this information to post directly on set. It's really great. It will also generate the sound report file. It's a CSV file format, so standard spreadsheet format. And that is stored also on the SD card itself alongside the audio files. All right? Any questions so far? I'll carry on. Okie doke. Let's just come out of here now. Let's talk a little bit. We've spoken about outputs. Let's just take a close look at the outputs here. So I'm going to come into my menu. And actually, before we do, I want to talk about this feature, a couple of features that we just introduced in the latest firmware, and that is the ability to, as you're recording or playing back a file that you've just recorded, you can lay cue marks. So I can hit play, and while it's playing, if I hear a point of interest, I go, oh, lay a cue mark there. Notice you can see here at the top at Q01. If I touch that again, Q02. So now I'm storing points of interest. Great. So now I can now play back from the beginning and just jump to those by quickly moving the joystick. I can even name those cue marks. I can delete them. I can even move them if they weren't quite in the right place. Not only can I navigate to them in here, but if you're using like apps like Adobe Audition or Reaper, which are well-known computer apps, you can read these cue markers there, so you can very easily jump within the computer application as well. While we're talking about playback, you can scrub either in slow motion or in fast motion. So just by pressing the encoder, if you look in the display at the top there, you can see a flashing 0x. So that means it's running at 0 speed at the moment. It's not moving. But as I turn the encoder, it's now scrubbing forward at 1/8 of the speed. So you can really tune into the fine detail of your recording. And you can hear it while it's playing in slow motion. You can also play in fast motion, okay, or go in reverse. So this allows you to really easily locate to a point of interest. I can even go all the way up to 16 times speed. All right? If I touch the top left corner here, you'll see all the files that I've recorded. In this case, just one file. Let's just quickly make another file here. Great. Okay, let's do another one. See how fast this is. Okay. Notice that, by the way, on the 10T, it doesn't have these dedicated buttons. To conserve space and allow us to bring in an extra row of faders, we have put the transport control on this joystick. Okay, so it's just up for record, stop, which is a press in, and down for play. And then for skipping, you just backwards and forwards, various takes, you can just go from left to right there. But let's go back to that file list. Here's the various files I've just recorded. Right? I can select any one of those by pressing in on the encoder, and you can see that I can do things like edit the name and number and add some notes. I'll hit back here. I can edit track names. Whoops. Here. And I can see all the track names here. I can rename. So I can do all sorts of really nice things there. But also, I can delete the file by trashing it, or I can go into the queue list and see the various queue markers in each file. And come in here, I can actually, if they were in the wrong place, I could select move and then back, put it forward 1/10 of a second, or move it here. It's a pretty cool feature. I can even name that queue mark, like dog barking or talent fainted or whatever it is, you know. So there you go. Back to home by pressing the home icon at the top here. Another really cool feature we just released is called Remix. So there's going to be many times, and we've all done it, where we've been, imagine a situation where you've got, say, an interviewer and 2 or 3 interviewees, you know, and so we've got, like, say, 4 channels. We've got a boom and they're all on radio mics. So maybe we're doing like 5 channels or something like this. And you're mixing, and at the end of the day shoot, you go back to play back the interview, and you find out that one of the interviewees was too low level. And you go, oh no, the mix is like too low level with that contributor. Or, you know, one of the contributors may have like rustled their radio mic in the middle of recording, and you just think, oh God, that's ruined the mix. Damn. Well, with Remix, it allows you to select any previously recorded file, hit play, and then readjust the mix levels. And so if one of the interviewees was too level, I can just turn up their level like this. I go, now I've got a better mix, and I can re-record the mix. So that way, you don't have to call back all these contributors the next day, and which would be very, very annoying. And you saved a lot of frustration and cost. This is pretty much a unique feature in any device in this category. One thing which we didn't mention, and this is going to sort of like get onto a slightly different subject, but let's just go to page 2 of a channel screen here. Notice in the bottom right-hand corner, we've got this thing called linking, right? Now, linking is allows you to link neighboring channels. So, for instance, if I have a stereo mic or a stereo source, I can link 1 and 2 so that the level is just controlled by a single pot, right? That's pretty useful. And the second pot would be the balance control. We also provide a linking option called 1 to 2 MS. MS is a mid-side stereo recording technique where you have like a mono signal coming in on one channel and a figure of 8 microphone doing the width, the stereo image, the S signal, which is your width. And this is quite a common technique for capturing like ambiences, because it basically gives you control of the stereo image. So we provide the ability to work with MS mics, and when you select 1 to 2 MS, it effectively decodes that signal into a standard stereo signal in the mix and to tracks 1 and 2, and it's a pretty powerful feature there. We also have other linking options. So if I want to group 3 pots, I've got 1 to 3 option. I've got all these options here: 1 through 4, 1 through 5, 1 through 6, 1 through 7, 1 through 8 even. Okay. When you link, for instance, if I select 1 through 8, now the gains of all of my channels are going to be controlled by that one pot. Right? Now, this takes us quite nicely onto another subject of capturing surround audio. Is anyone here involved in sound for VR or 360 sound in any way? Is there any interest in that? Okay. So especially with virtual reality now, there's a there seems to be a growing desire in the industry to know, how do we capture sound for virtual reality? How do I capture this whole 360 space, this whole sphere of sound? How do I do that? And we have provided this linking capability is actually a cool part of that, because now you can have multiple mics pointing in various configurations and directions and set all the mics up individually and then control the overall balance of all of those mics with one fader. But what I specifically want to talk about now is our support for something called ambisonics. Has everyone heard about ambisonics? Okay, so this summer, we're going to be releasing a free firmware update which will allow us to work with ambisonics A format microphones, such as the Sennheiser Ambio. This microphone has been on the market, I think, for probably just over a year now. And what this allows you to do, ambisonics, it's got like 4 capsules, as you can see here. And they're arranged in like this tetrahedral arrangement, such that it can capture a full sphere of sound from this center point. It's speaker agnostic ambisonics, because we're capturing a whole sphere and we're capturing all the audio signal from all directions. When you take that signal into post, you can process it for any speaker format you like, whether it's stereo, whether it's 5.1 surround, 7.1 surround, 11.1 surround. It's containing all the data, both width-wise, forward and backwards-wise, and up and down-wise, because it's capturing the full sphere. So this is why ambisonics is really becoming very popular now, because it captures all this data, which allows post to deliver in any format. Now, ambisonics has been around for a long time. It's been around since, the 70s, but it's coming very much back into vogue now. What we've done with our the firmware that we're going to be introducing for the MixPre-6 and the MixPre-10T, it will allow you to bring in the raw capsule signals from the microphone, so the 4 channels, because there's 4 capsules there. Take the output from this microphone, which is known as ambisonics A format, but essentially it's just the 4 raw signals coming off the microphone. We can bring that into our recorder on channels 1, 2, 3, and 4. We can power the mic from Phantom from our recorder, and we can now decode that signal so that you can hear, while you're capturing this 4-channel signal, you can actually decode it in real time to standard stereo. If you were to try and monitor those 4 channels just using a standard, in standard stereo, just by having channels 1, 3 going to left and 2 and 4 to right, it's going to sound totally weird. You're probably going to end up feeling seasick. So it has to be decoded, and that requires a special algorithm to do that. We can take that signal and decode it to standard stereo. That way, you are able to monitor the real image as it might sound when decoded in the final deliverable format. So you can make real good decisions. But even one step further than that, we are also going to be offering binaural stereo decode. And very quickly, binaural is a technique of reproducing full 360 or a sphere of 360 sound, not just this way, but this way, up and down, just using headphones, just using any standard pair of headphones. So we have a binaural decoder in here, so that when you monitor this ambisonic signal, you will be able to hear things whizzing around your head as they are really happening in real time. And this is the only device which will allow you to do that. Okay, pretty cool. We do believe that ambisonics is, and surround sound is going to become more and more important with the advent of VR, gaming, VR production. I think this is going to be definitely a growing market. So for you guys, just to know that it's there and that the firmware will be there and it's going to be a free update, that's a nice feature. Okie doke. Well, we've covered a lot of ground here. Where are we on time roughly? I just want to know how much further I can go here, because I can go on sometimes. 10, 15 minutes? Okay. So, that's good. I've still got a bit of time. I'm just going to quickly go through some of the other menus to make sure I haven't forgotten. And I immediately, by looking at page 1 of the menu, I'm going, oh yes, I have forgotten something quite crucial here. And that is presets. It's nice that once you've actually configured this machine to your personal taste, or maybe you have several setups that you use quite frequently. One day you're doing some videography, the next day you're doing some podcasting, the next day you're doing a YouTube video, or the next day you're recording some music in your studio, right? It's nice to be able to save configurations as a preset so that I can recall them really quickly. So I can, whoops, do it the other way here. I can come in here, maybe save a preset, hit OK, and now at any time I can hit my load preset button and recall that at any time. You can have, there's 4 internal memory slots where it can store this information, or you can just save those presets on an SD card. So you can save to SD card just here, and that gives you unlimited number of templates. Pretty useful feature. And if, for instance, you have people, staff working for you, and you want to set up the machine for them, you can just say, recall this preset, and this will do the job for you. You don't have to worry about configuring any menus. Okay, let's just move on. This is just where you set up projects. You can open existing projects, or you can create new projects here. Various other features. I'm not going to go into all of this. Let's have a look here. This is on the 10T. We've got a more in-depth timecode feature set. You know, I mentioned that on the MixPre-6 and MixPre-3 we can read timecode over HDMI. We can actually also read timecode over the auxiliary input, this little 3.5mm connector. So that's actually a useful. If you have one of these little nano lockets or tentacle boxes, you can plug in the timecode box into here and stamp your files with the timecode from there too. As I said before, though, this can generate timecode very accurately. I mean, there won't be any drift of timecode over an entire day, which is very important. It saves you having to rejam. And in fact, even if you power this down at lunchtime and go off and have a few beers and come back, it will retain the timecode so that when you boot up again, it's counting with that same accurate timecode. You don't need to rejam all your cameras and other audio devices on set. Okay, that's an important feature. So you have various functions there to do with setting frame rate and anything you'd expect really with timecode. The timecode is on 2 BNC connectors here. I can't show you this right now, but timecode in and out on BNC. You can actually also bring word clock in and out on those BNCs as well. There's a menu to configure that. Very quickly though, going back to a few other features. The record menu is where you set up your sample rate. And you can see here's where we can go up to 192 kilohertz. Let's see. Bit depth, record triggers. This turns on that remix feature that I was talking to you about here. So if I want to select a previous take that it was a bad mix, I'd turn on the feature here. Quickly going through. This is where the SD card menu is where you format your card. Obviously, remember that when you format a card, you're erasing it, and it warns you. Coming back, just another cool feature, by the way. You'll notice that there's this little toggle switch here. It looks like snowflakes, but actually they're stars. Star 1 and star 2. And on the MixPre-6 over here, you've got a star button 2. All of these buttons are just user programmable buttons. So you can very easily program functions in there like tone or slate. The 10T here has also a tone generator. They all have tone generators, but it also has a slate mic. Okay. So, I mean, look, there's a lot more to these devices, but you can see that these are great tools for videographers and YouTubers, podcasters, production sound mixers, sound designers, just field recordists in general. And you choose which model is right for you based really on the number of inputs and outputs and whether you want advanced timecode and such like that. I've spent most of the time on these devices, but I also want to mention another model, which I have hidden behind me here. This is a, it looks very, very similar to the 10T, but it's actually called the 10M, the M standing for musician. Now, sound devices is primarily known and has been known for the last 20 years, because we're 20 years old, by the way, this year. So, happy birthday to us. Let's raise a glass. The 10M is our first product aimed specifically at musicians. And although it looks very similar to the 10T, and the hardware is very similar, there's a few things different, like there's no time code in and out here, or there's no HDMI. But in terms of the feature set, the operating system, it's a total different product. It has very similar interface, and it uses the same touch screen, right? It uses the same sort of touch screen interface, but it can do a whole range of cool stuff for musicians who want to be able to compose and produce songs without having to use a computer. Now, I'm a musician myself. I've been and a composer. I've been one actually since I was 10. I've always enjoyed writing music, and I've found, and I'm pretty tech savvy, and I use all the computer applications like Pro Tools, Logic, Reaper, Cubase, and I know how to use those. But when I sit in front of a computer, I feel like I'm becoming more of an engineer rather than a musician. And as a musician, if I have an idea, I want to lay that down in the highest quality without having the technology get in the way, because I'm in my creative mindset. And this is what we've designed this for. It uses exactly the same super high quality mic preamps. So we can capture in the highest quality. But when I record now, I can create songs which are 12 tracks, which use up to 12 tracks. So that could be like 2 for drums, 1 for bass guitar, 2 for guitars, 2 for keyboards, 2 for vocals, and 3 spare. Okay, so I've got a lot of tracks there. I can overdub. The key thing with this product is I can overdub. Does everyone know what overdubbing is? Everyone know what overdubbing is? Yes. Right, you do. Some don't. So this is become like a standard. Every musician will know what this is about. And it's a technique that's been around for making music since the days of the Beach Boys and the Beatles. So late 50s, early 60s. And it allows you to build a song one track at a time or one instrument at a time. So maybe to start with, I mean, the Beatles in the early days only had 4-track recorders. They could record 4 tracks. So what they would do is they would record maybe drums and electric bass at the same time, 3 tracks. And then they would bounce that down to just 2 tracks, and then they would maybe add a piano on the 2 remaining tracks, okay, or some keyboard sound. Then they'd have 4 tracks with drums, bass, and a keyboard. Then they'd bounce those 4 tracks down to 2 tracks again, and then add some vocals on the 2 remaining tracks. And then they'd collapse that down to 2 tracks, and then they'd keep building that way. And that's the way they had to do it. And they had to make creative decisions. Let's face it, they made some pretty cool creative decisions. So bouncing is a very common technique, and we provide that in here. So if the 12 tracks that we've provided isn't enough, and I think in most circumstances that is enough, you can bounce down, right? So you can also do overdubbing, which means that I can play back, say I've recorded my bass and drums, I can now play those tracks back and play along my keyboard over the top in synchronization. So the drums and the bass are playing back, I'm recording my part over the top on a new track. I can even punch in and punch out, which is an essential tool for people who are doing overdubbing. That, for instance, maybe I recorded the whole length of the song. The verse was really good, but the chorus, when I got to the chorus, I didn't do such a good job. So I want to keep the verse, but I want to re-record the chorus. So I can lay a cue mark at the beginning of the chorus and start playing back maybe 2 or 3 bars before that, hit playback, and the machine will automatically drop into record at the chorus, and I can play along. So punch in, punch out is all there. We've got a metronome built in to allow you to keep in time. It's got all the ability to set up, the speed, the tempo, the time signature, how loud the metronome is. We've even put in some really nice effects in here. So we've got some really nice custom-made reverb algorithms. We've got a plate, a hall and a room reverb, and you can adjust the decay time, the pre-delay, and the HF damping. And most singers will always want to record their voice with reverb on. These reverbs are good enough to be used for your final recording. The other effect that we include in here is something called vocal air, which is a great tool for a singer-songwriter. Vocal air is like this beautiful, airy, breathy sheen which you can add to the top of a vocal. It's like a sort of sound. And it's become very popular with singer-songwriters now. It adds presence to the vocal. And we've provided, most musicians have no idea how to get this effect. They'll just turn up the high-frequency EQ, and that ends up making everything far too sibilant. It's actually a custom-made algorithm which we've created. We're not going to tell you how we do it, but it really adds this nice sheen. And we've provided a single knob dial for adding more or less of that to your vocal. Very importantly, I'm going to wrap up very soon. So once you've recorded your song on this, you can basically export it to a computer. You can create a stereo mix very easily and upload it to YouTube or SoundCloud or whatever. All of this functionality, which I've been talking about in here for creating songs, we are going to make available to all the other models. The 3, the 6, and the 10T. We're going to make it available as a plugin. And this plugin is going to be around the 99 euro mark or something like that. But it's really cheap. Can you imagine now you have effectively a portable 12-track musician's DAW in a small box like this, all battery powered. You could basically sit in the middle of nowhere under a tree with your guitar and a microphone and record a really high quality album. So this is very, very unique. The quality of the MixPre is so good that anything you do on here, if you want to finish it in a computer, you don't have to start again because the quality was captured in the highest quality already. So you can just drag the files from here directly into your computer and carry on. One last thing, not just a great songwriting and composing tool, but also great for live performance. If you happen to be a musician that goes out doing gigs in the local wine bar or coffee house, you can use this as your mixer. You've got 8 inputs here. You can use it as your mixer. You can use it to connect to the PA. It's got built-in reverb. It's got everything you need to pretty much do a small gig. And if your band doesn't turn up, you can prepare backing tracks on this and set up the mix and effectively do a bit of karaoke. And so there you go. I mean, that's what I've got for you now. You can see how versatile the MixPre series is. There's a MixPre for everybody, and depending on your budget and your needs, I really suggest trying them out. And one thing you will be certain of, though, is the audio quality is as good as it comes. So, any questions? Please.
About that remix.
Yes.
Can you change the level while you are playing?
Yes, absolutely. So.
And second, latency, is that the problem there when you're dubbing?
No, not at all. No, it's.
Because that can be a problem with computers.
Overdubbing.
Overdubbing, yes.
So when you're overdubbing tracks on here, there's absolutely zero latency when you're doing it on the device. No, it's absolutely... And every overdub and punch-in is totally seamless with the playback data and the record data. So it's really smooth and clean. Any other questions on any subject? I know I've covered a lot of ground here, so I'm sure I've forgotten something. You getting any questions? Probably not. I didn't ask people for questions. Okay. Well, thank you. Thanks for coming by. Thank you. If you want to come and have a look and play, feel free, please, everybody. So.